You are listening to Quantum Connections with Lucky One.
Welcome back, second hour of Quantum Connections. I'm just the lowly imported co-host. Lucky's on the air with us, and our guest, Mr. Shi. Mr. Shi is a whistleblower who worked in the airline parts manufacturing business for or around a company called Moog. You know them as the synthesizer makers, but they make lots of other things, one of which is high-quality aircraft parts for the planes that you fly from city to city. Well, as it turns out, not all those parts are genuine. Welcome to the program, Mr. Shi. How are you?
How are you, Brooks?
I am doing great. I'm in an undisclosed location in South Carolina today. Well, the subject of tonight's interview with Mr. Shi is that in the aviation industry, traditionally, we have really been concerned about the quality of the parts that are used to repair and to maintain aircraft as they go from city to city inside the United States. And it's usually a pretty tightly regulated industry. But of late, we have been plagued with various counterfeit parts getting into our system. And I guess we're going to ask the questions and answer those questions. So tell us about your experience working in the industry.
Okay, my name is Charles Shi. I was formerly employed at aircraft group of Moog Inc. Moog is a U.S. New York Stock Exchange listed company headquartered in Buffalo, New York. I worked as the East Asia supply chain manager from 2006 until 2016 for 10 years. So I founded actually the Moog aircraft group supply chain here in the region. I was managing the supply chain team, about 20 people when I was wrongfully terminated by early 2016. For whistleblowing to FAA on extraordinary air safety threat caused by Chinese machining supplier who criminally, intentionally falsified material certification while used large quantities of fake material or substitute material for its previous aerospace customer, BE Aerospace, as well as Moog.
Now, the supply chain management, a lot of people don't know this industry like you and I do. We have supplier quality engineers that work with suppliers. We make sure that they comply not only with all the regulations and certifications that are with the industry, but we also ensure the quality of those parts by doing periodic audits. And I'm sure that's what your department did for Moog, is you audited suppliers. Now, what did you discover in one of these audits of a Chinese supplier and what were the parts? Were they electronic or were they mechanical?
It's mechanical machine parts for the flight control systems. Moog is the world leader in integration and manufacturing the complete flight control systems for Boeing and Airbus, and for other military airplane manufacturers as well.
Now, these are cast aluminum parts that are then machined and parkerized and put on the shelf for use, right?
Yeah, Moog parts normally are considered with aluminum and steel. The parts in particular we call the counterfeiting a steel part. That part is what we call the single point of failure part for Boeing 737 spoilers. The spoiler, yeah.
Well, I was going to explain what the spoiler, when you're flying on an airplane, you have the ailerons, which are big surfaces and flaps, but the spoilers are little tiny surfaces that are designed to make smooth turns so you don't jerk the plane around when you're flying along at 600 miles an hour. They're probably about 4 square feet, and they're just designed to push the wing down so that you can make gentle right turns and left turns. What happens when this part fails under the spoiler?
Yes, spoilers actually also controls the airplane takeoff and landing. So when we sit in the airplane, the landing, so we saw the flaps on each side of the wing suddenly erects. So those to reduce the wind speed, and that spoiler is the actuator to control those flaps. So that is very safety critical. And the part being counterfeited is the single point of failure part of that spoiler actuator.
So there's no backup.
So that means if that single point of failure part failed, so the spoilers could just get ripped off, and the airplane went uncontrolled, so causing airplane catastrophic accidents for sure.
Now, what was the nature of the counterfeiting? Was it that they did not use a high quality steel, or the machining wasn't correct? Obviously, it was the right dimensions, or the supplier could never have sent it to the supply shop or to the maintenance shop. But were they using inferior steel?
That's for sure. You see, for this matter, so we had this Chinese supplier, which is so-called approved machining supplier by Moog, for the OEM Boeing plane, part supply. So that is, you see, the counterfeited, suspected, unapproved parts are compromising some 500 Boeing 737s. So that is what we call the extraordinary air safety threat.
Now, what happened when you brought this to the attention of the FAA? You obviously had documentation to show that the steel was inferior. Some sample of the steel was showing that it wasn't the right carbon content or the right hardness or something. What did the FAA do when you took them the documentation?
Brooks, I think that is a long story. Can I just start briefly with the development of the mentor, how I discovered and how I submit. To the audience, because the audience does not know. Okay, so I explained I worked as the regional supply chain manager for Moog Aircraft Group since 2006. Then by 2013, after I worked for Moog for 7 years, I had a new boss hired by the aircraft group headquarters, U.S. He is my supervisor. His title is the Asian Supply Chain Director, and his name is Zhou, J-O-E, his first name. Last name is Z-O-U. He's a Chinese American. He relocated from U.S. to Shanghai, where I worked. And he introduced to Moog a supplier named Suzhou New Hongji Precision Parts Company Limited. We short call them NHJ. So around late 2013 or beginning of 2014, so we started the supply development with that particular supplier. But in April 2015, I was tipped off by two of my subordinates. One of them is managing that supplier on a daily basis. That guy, I cannot disclose his name. Let's see let's call him Mr. S. So Mr. S told me, and another my team member told me that NHG was excited by its previous aerospace customer, BE Aerospace. I asked why. They said NHG was used fake material in their BE Aerospace parts, resulting in the parts failure in the BE Aerospace laboratory test. So they excited from them. They put out from them. So then I immediately reported this this information to Joe, and Joe just brushed it off, and he asked my people to give NHG more business. And NHG was a privately owned company, a small company. They don't have enough capacity to make Moog parts. So they outsource Moog parts to unknown second-tier suppliers. So which is a big violation. So when I learned that information, I asked the SQE, the supply quality lead in my team, named Claire Stazak. She's a Briton. She's working in Shanghai and managing Chinese suppliers in terms of quality. Mm-hmm. I asked Claire to audit those unknown or unapproved second-tier suppliers of NHJ, but Claire refused. So I asked Joe, I said, if the Claire refused to do what she should do, then I go, because I used to audit and approve the rest of Moog regional suppliers by myself, starting from 2006. So I was trained and very experienced in doing that. So I went to audit 4 of the NHJ second-tier suppliers in June 2015, 2 years ago, with the Mr. S, who is managing that supplier, because NHJ told us those 4 suppliers, unknown suppliers, are supposed to make Moog parts. So we visited each of them in 2 days. Then we had alarming findings. End of the 2-day audit. So we sit down with the owner of NHJ, Mr. Lee, L.I. is the last name, Lee, and his team. We said, so from our audit, so we observed, so those second tiers are not, they had big findings. They don't have traceability system. They don't know Moog, and they basically they are not supposed to Moog parts. So we asked them to suspend outsourcing parts from them. Okay, and Mr. Lee, the owner of NHJ, agreed in the meeting. Then we came back 2 weeks later. So came back from I wrote a audit report to Joe after the 2-day audit, and I sent to him only the audit report by email, because he was in the U.S. attending meetings. So he responded to me just the one sentence, excellent. Okay, so then he came back 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, he bypassed me, did not talk to me, and he talked to two of my people, because one of them is managing the energy, another one is responsible for giving new business to all regional suppliers. So he told them to expedite developing energy and giving them new business to them. Despite he already knew. I told him they agreed not to suspend outsourcing parts from the unknown second tiers. So this is very, very serious problem. I felt the thing is very, very wrong. So I prepared to whistleblower to Joe's boss, Kevin Wallach. His title is the Global Supply Chain Director of Aircraft Group of Moog, located in East Aurora, New York. So then I asked the Mr. S to conduct another detailed audit, product audit of the NHJ before I whistleblower to the Kevin, because I was aware a lot of irregularities and violations already taking place with that supplier. So as Mr. S did produce an audit report on the 7th of August, 2015. And with that audit report, I wrote an email to Kevin Wallach. I said, Kevin, I took the risk of losing my job to do this. This might be good for the company and also for the aviation industry. Then I told him, the bad things Joe was behaving, and also the non-conformances and the violations. Mr. S already audited, and with his findings, alarming findings. Then Kevin Wallach ordered, and Kevin Wallach, he is the supply chain director, and also together with the VP of supply quality, Mr. Jesse Magoo, ordered an investigation by Claire Stadak, because she is supposed to do the quality audit for 3 weeks. For 3 weeks, starting middle of August 2015. But unfortunately, Claire Stadak, a young lady, mishandled the investigation. And during the investigation, she refused to investigate the tip-off of the Mr. S. Mr. S, because Claire went to NHJ 3 times during the 3-week period. Each time she went there 4 or 5 hours and sit idly and look at some papers, but assisted by Mr. S, because Mr. S speaks both English and Chinese. Claire does not speak Chinese. So since Mr. S knows everything, he already provided a clear evidence, objective evidence, that NHJ falsified production traveler. So Brooks, you know the traveler. Traveler is the production documentation, recording.
That has all the test results. And when you go audit these companies, you go look at their control plan, which is approved by the customer. And on this control plan will be the specifications, the hardness, the tensile strength, the melting temperature, all of the physical and chemical properties of that part, as well as the dimensions and the tolerances are in this control plan. When you audit against that control plan and you go to the lab and look at the metallurgy tests, and you audit those tests and find that, hey, this is automotive metal, this isn't aircraft metal that you're using, It looks like the part, it feels like the part, but you put stress on this part and it's going to break in the air. Well, the reason they do it is because it costs a fraction the amount to manufacture. So they make a lot more profit. And I've been the victim of this myself. It wasn't nearly anything to do with safety. But it turned out that my boss was getting a kickback from the company who was selling the inferior part, or actually the overpriced part in this case, to the company. And this is how deep the corruption goes. But of course, the part I was auditing, nobody's life depended on it. Every time I fly in Southwest airplanes, which by the way exclusively use the Boeing 737 aircraft, I'm going to be looking at that airfoil and that spoiler every single time I fly now because of this appearance.
Yeah. Now this matter, was covered up by Moog and abused by FAA investigation. So the counterfeit parts are still with the Boeing 737s now in service. 500 of them. Some of them already sold to U.S. Navy.
Now does Boeing know? Does Boeing know that these parts were counterfeit?
Yes, I also passed on the whistleblower information to Boeing as early as February 2016. Last year, after a few communications with Boeing said, "Oh, this matter was now handled by FAA," so they just went silent.
You mean they passed the buck to the FAA?
Pardon?
They passed the information to the FAA and did nothing else?
No, before I alert Boeing, I contacted FAA in early January 2016, when I was the same day when I was wrongfully terminated by Moog, just for whistleblowing to Moog top management on the safety threat. I said after a few communications with the Boeing people, they said, this matter was already investigated by FAA, so we have to turn over this and we assist FAA to do their investigation. Then they just went away.
I wonder if Southwest Airlines knows that they have counterfeit parts on their airplanes.
I sent them an email today.
Yeah, you see, Brooks and Elizabeth. So I received one information from one of the concerned party. They contacted Boeing to clarify this, and Boeing told them this. I quote, "The safety of the flying public is our primary concern, and we take all such allegations seriously. The FAA investigated these allegations per their process. The supplier, working with Boeing, took corrective actions on 2 issues, and FAA confirmed they had been addressed. I would refer additional questions to the FAA and Moog." You see, this is completely misleading, because I'm also sending the safety threat alert to hundreds of the airlines worldwide last few weeks, and they received this response. You see, this is completely misleading and unacceptable. Boeing mentioned these 2 allegations out of 9 actually were substantiated violation by FAA during their investigation, but each of the allegation substantiated was mishandled. For instance, the first allegation violation substantiated by FAA relates to the outsourcing parts by NHJ to the second tiers. So FAA only acknowledged the first operation of one of that single point of failure part were outsourced, which is a complete distortion of the fact.
Well, that might be a distortion of the fact, but you cannot, once your production part approval process, we call it a PPAP, once that PPAP is done, you cannot outsource that part to another company and then call it your part.
Right.
That is a violation of the contract. And,
yes, that's exactly, because they don't even tell us, because we audited their what they call the second tiers, full of them. Nobody acknowledged the parts. We showed them. We said, did you make this part? They said, no. We asked the question to full of them. So they all denied. So where could those parts be made? It's unknown source, completely. Because NHG don't have the capacity and don't have the the machines to do that. So they just ask us without Moog knowledge. After after Moog clear newness, they just misled FAA, and FAA did not conduct their own independent investigation, and they don't even, accept what I gave them, the objective evidence. Because you see, on this Sean's audit report, it says clearly there are full of the part numbers, completely outsourced.
That's right. And what's required at this point is all those parts have to be contained.
Okay, guys.
Gotta go.
Guys, I have to jump in. Fellas, I have to jump in and I have to interrupt. We are going to break, and it's a hard break. We'll be back in 3 minutes, folks. Be sure to call in if you have any questions or comments, especially if you're with the FAA. You call in right now, 213-233-3998, and get these questions asked, because I know there's somebody out there listening. See you here in 3 minutes.
No hate, no hype. No fear.
You're listening to Truth Frequency Radio.
We are TFR.
Those guys, they want to hold on to their power at any cost. And they don't care if people have to die. They don't care if, the state has to be destroyed. They don't care if the environment has to be destroyed. They will hold at any cost, at the cost of everything.
And we're back, and the timing of that intro was key, and I've got chills all over my body with the discussion that we're having today. I'm Lucky One. With me is Brooks Agnew, and I'm giving him the control of the ship today with Charles Shi, whistleblower for the faulty parts that's being sold to our aircraft industry, our air passenger industry. I'm not even conversant or familiar enough with the terms and everything. And these two are just really chewing it up. I do want to ask a question of Mr. Shi before I hand this back over to Brooks Agnew. I don't want to assume why any whistleblower would want to go to the press. Would you please let us know why you're on my show today? Have you been threatened?
Yeah, that's for sure, because, Moog intentionally leaked my whistleblowing information to FAA, to the very suspected Joe, to endorse him, working with the criminal counterfeiter, Chinese counterfeiter, tampering and destroying these evidences. Because I have evidences to show that. Mm-hmm. And the suspect of the leaking is the VP of Moog supply chain for the aircraft group. Her name is Kate Schaefer. Because after I was terminated the second day, I received a call from Mr. S. He called me. He said, "Charles, did you whistleblow to FAA?" I said yes, but I asked him, "How do you know?" He said, "Joe was yelling in the office to all of us, saying Charles has whistleblower to the FAA." He said, and Joe also told them, Joe was asked by his boss, and his boss apparently was a VP of supply chain of aircraft group, Kate Schaefer, because Schaefer was right in the Shanghai to terminate me. And K Schaefer asked Joe to take the leadership during the another Moog internal investigation before the FAA was coming. So you see, this criminal act should not be tolerated.
This would be under RICO, wouldn't it, Brooks?
I'm not really sure. I don't see this very
it's conspiracy.
In the automotive business, we see the same thing. You'll see a inferior ignition switch or an inferior control module make its way into the cars. And then what the supplier quality engineers do is we find these irregularities in a regular audit because they have a failure rate. They have a that exceeds what we would normally allow for production. In some cases, as low as 50 parts per million. But when you start having 10 and 15% failure rates, then you go to the company and say, hey, this ignition switch or this relay is failing at an abnormally high rate. We need to find another supplier. Well, sometimes the car company doesn't listen. They don't do anything about that. And that usually ends up being a recall, which we just saw what happened to Takata. Takata got hit with about a 5 million vehicle recall, and it put them out of business. They were one of the biggest independent airbag suppliers in the world, and they went out of business because of a recall like this. But sometimes it costs people their lives. And when we're talking about items in an aircraft that are, as Mr. Xue says, is a single point of failure, that is to say, if this part fails, the plane stands a very good chance of crashing. Maybe the pilot will not be able to overcome the failure of this part. And there's a lot of people's lives that depend on this part working correctly. Well, in the last half hour, we outline a violation which is so basic in the supplier quality business, and that is you go to a company, you watch them build the part, and you sign off on the part. They receive what's called a part submission warrant. They're licensed to make this part for the company. Then that company goes out and says, well, we found another company that can make this part cheaper. We'll just resell it. And so they sublet the business out to another company that the customer knows nothing about. That is a violation of the contract. Now, the company may say, hey, this is great. We just got a 10% discount on this part. But it's a 10% discount because it's cheap steel. It's not the high carbon steel that's required for this particular part, which means it can fail. So where this gets really expensive is the containment action. Containment means we know this has been going on for so many months or so many years. We have to go back and find all those parts. If they're on the shelf, if they're in the mechanic shops, even if they're in airplanes. And we have to recall and replace those parts. That can cost tens, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's why whistleblowers like Mr. Xue are excoriated and shown the door. Am I wrong here?
Yes, Brooks, you are exactly right. You know automotive very well, and I worked for automotive for 10 years. So I also had this experience, supply chain management and so also quality in automotive. But compared with automotive, aircraft is helpless. So if the cars, you see, was mounted with the fake counterfeit safety critical parts, so the maximum, the result, you park the car and you're on the road. So you wait for, somebody to help you. But airplanes, so the safety critical counterfeit parts controlling the airplanes in the middle of the air. So they broke, or they malfunction, or they completely lost control. So who can help you? So, and you see, and you are exactly right to say we should have containment actions to remove or recall those suspected unapproved parts. In this case, it's obvious, it's verified counterfeiting, and this is organized counterfeiting. You say, I had a witness testimony. You say, in front of 2 international journalists. You say, I had a phone interview with one of the BE supply people. That lady is managing that NHJ, like Mr. S. She wrote, she said something. I quote exactly what she said. I asked, my question are related to NHJ. I heard BE pulled out from NHJ a few years ago. Can you tell me why BE pulled out? That lady said they used fake material. Then I asked her, so they used the fake material? She said, okay, so NHJ own employee admitted they were counterfeiting. What do you think? Who was doing the counterfeiting at NHJ? Was the employee themselves or they were directed by? The lady said, of course, their boss, Mr. Lee. You see, this is organized crime. Hello?
Yeah, it is, and
Okay,
it's
so
all for the almighty dollar, because they could have just kept making the part and kept the contract, but they decided to sublet it out because they did not want to add the capacity to their company to keep up with the production requirements.
And even NHJ themselves, they just falsify the material certification and use the substitute material. So I had other witnesses. They testified, and I had recordings. I tried to send these recordings to FAA. FAA didn't even care to take them, and they don't even listen to that. And they accepted whatever Moog was misleading them, and they said there was no violation substantiated in June 1st, 2015. Then I provided them compelling evidence, which I substantiated 3 lots of material. Lots of that single point of failure was substantiated for some 1,000 pieces of products.
Wow. So all they would have to do NHJ, is sample the part.
NHJ themselves, you see, they substitute 700 pieces of substitute material versus they used only 300 approved aerospace grade of material in that 3 lots. And NHJ was the single source for that single point of failure part, starting from early 2015 until now.
Well, all those people that are flying in Boeing 737s, this is a safety critical part in that aircraft. That's United Arab Emirates and Southwest Airlines fly this airplane as a commuter plane almost exclusively. But there are other airlines that fly this airplane as well. Not, you said Airbus as well. This part was also supplied to Airbus.
Unfortunately, yeah. Luckily, Moog did not give Airbus parts, to NHJ before they were caught.
Okay, gotcha.
And you see, Brooks, the gist, the key critical point of this matter, the whole matter, extraordinary matter, is FAA oversight in investigation. You see, according to FAA own suspected unapproved part procedure, you see, they had a procedure on this suspected unapproved part. If there was criminal activities involved, they should contact law enforcement agencies to investigate the criminality, because the whole matter was verified criminal counterfeiting. It's organized criminal counterfeiting. It's not innocently used, 1 lot or 2 lot, cheap or inferior substitute material. It's organized. They organized this crime for BE Aerospace, BE put out. They organized this crime, for Moog, which Moog still approved them to use them. For what? I think for the for the economic reasons by the Chinese counterfeiter, also by Moog, because you know what? To recall those parts, it may take only half an hour. Okay, but it's not that simple because if FAA did substantiate the violation, they have to issue the directives to all airlines. They bought these Boeing 737, 500 of them. That's worldwide. So first, they need to ground the airplane, to stop the airplane from flying for at least 6 months or even 8 months before the replacement good part was produced. Then they should replace those parts. Okay, so they know the fallout, the gravity, so they choose to cover up. They leave the risk to the air travelers, to the airlines, to the pilots and the crew. You see, and
I take that back. Then we're not talking about millions. We're talking about billions of dollars riding on this part.
Right. So that's why I call it extraordinary and unprecedented. And this is not counterfeiting for the replacement parts. We know it's the replacement. The aftermarket counterfeiting is rampant worldwide, but this case is OEM because the Boeing subcontractor of Moog, who is responsible for the flight control systems, they use the OEM machining parts, which is a verified criminal counterfeiter, making and delivering thousands of pieces of safety critical parts.
Well, the 737-800 and the 737-700 are the new modern aircraft that are out there. They carry 173 passengers. What is it going to take to fix this?
Right. You see, and they leave all the risk to the airlines, to the pilots, crew, and the passengers also. Even the airplane crashes. So who's going to pay for that? Insurance companies. So this case is also a fraud against insurance companies. This is unfair for the insurance to bear this cost because nobody tells them if I don't disclose this. So Elizabeth, you asked a question, why I stand out and disclose this to the press. You see, my life was already compromised. So what more risk could I fear, by not disclosing this extraordinary air safety threat to public?
Well,
so
law enforcement,
my life is danger. Yeah, yes. Anytime.
Okay, the law enforcement that's out there listening to this, you need to step up. Everybody needs to be stepping up right now. Do not just sit there and listen to this and say, oh my God, and grab your pearls, okay? Get up off your butts and call. Start making phone calls, find out what's going on, get a hold of the FBI. There is some kind of collusion going on here, and I hate that word nowadays, but anyway, this is bad stuff, folks. We keep on wondering, you hear about the Wigner effect and you're hearing about all the speculation and conspiracy theories and things like that. Guys, this is a whistleblower telling why these planes are crashing. Okay. Yeah. Somebody in the chat just talked about an engine fell off because of a Chinese bolt. Because of a Chinese bolt that had dropped on its belly at O'Hare, I think it was, they said.
Oh, that was a DC-10.
Elizabeth, Elizabeth, let me cut in, Brooke. Yeah. Sorry. So you see, Moog, I also believe Moog is the leader technologically in the flight control systems in the world because they provide, complete flight control systems for Boeing 737, 787, and also military jets like F-35 or F-18. So the technologically, Moog is a leader. For sure, but supply chain management is very, very bad. You see, in 2014, Honeywell, the engine supplier, the supplier for Boeing and Airbus, they sued Moog for providing counterfeit engine parts for their programs, because that, the counterfeit parts failed, with Honeywell engines. So they sued them for $20 million only for maybe a dozen airplane engines. So you see this case is a single point of failure for the spoiler for 737, 500 of them, because the NHJ, the criminal counterfeiter, was the single source for that part 2 years, even today. And I had all this evidences.
An engine is a rotable part.
Right.
These parts that go underneath the spoiler on the wing are not rotable parts. This is a part of the airframe. So It's much harder to replace than it is a rotable. A rotable is not necessarily owned by the airline. Usually a leasing company owns the engines, and they lease the engines to the airplane. That's just the way the industry works. So there are lots and lots of engines on the shelf, and they can be changed out in a matter of hours. But these parts are part of the airframe, and it means that the plane has to stop flying until that part comes in. That's just the rules.
Right. Because this is the OEM. If you don't have a replacement supplier, or to produce the new good part, so it's never ever you can replace a part. So this is because Moog chose to cover up, to fraudulently misrepresent the fact, and they terminated me, retaliated me by terminating me, try to shut me up, and also leaking the confidential FAA whistleblowing information to the suspect. Their intention to give this information for this, for this Chinese organized crime counterfeiter, to hire some professional killers to terminate me. So see this.
It didn't work because
extraordinary.
It didn't work because now the whole world knows it. You're on TFR.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Listen, I want to bring up a point, and especially to the listener, for what this means to you and me. And it was Happy, one of our new hosts here on Truth Frequency Radio, who's going to be starting tomorrow with us. He says, hey, let's make sure we sexually abuse everybody who wants to fly. What he's referring to is the TSA, the Traffic Safety Administration, molesting people before they get on a plane. But, let's go ahead and abuse everybody who wants to fly, but let those who fix planes to do just whatever they want. And we, the people, are the potential terrorists. That's what it means to you and me. The people, you're sitting there, you're depending on these people to buy the right parts, to do the right thing, yet we get abused before we get on a plane. We have to take off our shoes. We get x-rayed, we get scanned, we get our privates shown on some screen, because in the name of safety, there's no safety in this. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit riled. I'm kind of pissed off right now, I'll be honest with you, because this has been allowed to go on and nobody has said anything about it. We've had all these kind of plane crashes and nobody's done anything about it. All we have is these pat answers. It's being investigated. Well, I got an investigation for you right here.
Yeah, Elizabeth, you see the ordinary passengers, air travelers like us, they don't know this matter. They sit in 40 Boeing 737, taking that trips. They don't even realize. So they are playing the Russian roulette. You say each time. So they sitting in the airplane, so they just play the Russian roulette without even knowing this. So this is, I don't know how I can express my, anger and, this disappointment of no action. I have, contacted a lot of U.S. agencies. I'm approaching U.S. Congress people and, all those, and I send this information to the DOJ, website, and also the FBI, crime tip website. So maybe my English is bad. I don't speak good English, so there is no response. That's why, also one of the reasons.
I think that's the scariest part of this whole debacle is there's no response. There's no nothing. And the media seems to be turning a deaf ear to this.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm driving to Vegas next time I go.
Right? I don't want to get in a plane again. I really don't.
Yeah, but you may have a choices. You can sit in Airbus 320. That
That's
part
right.
might not be compromised so far. But for the 737, one other journalist asked me, "Do you want to sit in the 737?" I said, "Probably no. Before the faulty parts, the counterfeit parts, the critical safety parts were removed, completely removed. Then we are safe to fly those airplanes." Boeing is a good, reputable manufacturer of airplanes. So why we should boycott them? Unless they refuse to remove or ask Moog to remove their counterfeit parts from the airplanes.
It's too big of a risk. That's why they have the certificates of analysis that go with every single one of these parts. And when they counterfeit this, what we call a C of A, when they counterfeit the C of A, the customer believes that this part comes from the supplier and that it's certified and it has passed all the tests. But when they counterfeit the C of A and the part is actually coming from a storm door company somewhere in China, that puts everyone at risk.
Brooks, you know the manufacturing process and you are expert. So for the aerospace, we use first article inspection, FAI, instead of PPAP. You see, the development part of the process is we first give them order for FAA part, which is 10 pieces. The suppliers supposed to deliver 10 good parts, with some documentations certifying these parts are correctly made and with the correct material. Then Moog only inspect those 10 first article parts and do some tests out of that 10 and get them approved. And for forever, then for the production parts, which they are in a massive production lot. So Moog only conduct, dimensional check and also documentation check. But from the documentation, we don't ask the suppliers to send each time of their part with a raw material certificate. Okay, that raw material certificate was kept in the supplier place. Only in case there is an aircraft accident, so investigators come over and they look at that. And those certificate, raw material certificate, is not originals because aerospace accept copies of the raw material certificate unless you stamp that with the raw material vendors companies vendors stamp. Okay, so for
boys, I have to interrupt. Mr. Shi, I really have to interrupt, and I hate doing it, but we are about to end the show. It is going to end on us no matter what we say, okay? Tell everybody real quick where they can get a hold of you and get more information. Quick.
Okay, I had
quickly, please.
Twitter account, Charles Shi 888, CharlesShi 888. So people can contact me. Look at my.
Thank you very much. We will see you guys next week. Okay, love you.
Live.com.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Find your quantum connections at tfrlive.com.